Protecting schools and those within them is a widely debated topic. Everyone wants buildings secure and students safe, but how to do that is where views often differ. I'm Melanie Whalen, the marketing manager for the education market at Allegiant. I'm joined by Guy Grace, who is chairman of the Partner Alliance for Safer Schools, also known as PASS, and retired director of security and emergency planning for Littleton Public Schools in Colorado. He's here to share his thoughts on school security. So, Guy, we appreciate your taking the time to share your insights given all the changes we've experienced in the last 12 months. My first question is, we've seen from students to teachers to parents, there are so many opinions on how to make schools safe. What are some of your top recommendations for securing schools?
We need to not have a knee slap reaction. We need to look at everything in a holistic way. What is going to enhance the ability for our teachers to teach, our students to learn, and for our community not to worry about their loved ones learning or working in the schools on any given day? You know, we look at the correlation of schools, you know, they're a reflection of the society as a whole where they reside. And so the same problems that you have in the communities often are in the schools. Maybe they're a lot more controlled. You know, we look at a school is controlled. You know, it's an environment for, you know, for students to learn and to prepare them for their futures. But when we look at that, we need to put in safety and security practices in a holistic way. So ways that don't turn our schools into look like prisons. I mean, if you go too far, you know, you need to look at it in a way that your layers of security and the components that you put in complement each other. And in the end of the day, they make the situation more safe. And then, you know, I would say when I look at safety and security and when we put in, you know, security technologies, there's a strong correlation with high academic performance in schools, or, you know, the ability for students to continue on and get their diploma and be educated. You know, why is that? Why is that? You know, if a kid's sitting in a school and a teacher's sitting in a school and they're constantly worried about safety matters, obviously they're not going to be teaching in a, you know, in a great manner, or the students are going to be fearful and not learning in a great manner. But also, when we think about that, what I mean by holistic way is when we put in security technology, or we implement policies and procedures in the human side of, you know, policies and procedures and drills and emergency preparedness, we need to do it in a way that also doesn't create fear. We always need to look at what we put in place as empowering.
So as we think about that holistic picture, what do you think is the biggest gap in securing schools today?
Well, I think that you know, I applaud our schools across the country. When we look across the country, many of them, most of them, 99% of them are doing what they can in school safety. But I think and the same thing happened to me. I think that as we build these systems and we look at it, we need to weigh the risks of what could happen to our school on any given day. So whatever those components that we are going, and processes and procedures we are going to put into the schools, we need to carefully think them out. So what happens is you'll see across the nation, a lot of school districts will have really good safety and security technology. However, what they might have done is they might have put in some technology to deal with one situation that is less likely to happen, and not put in a component to drill with a situation that is more likely to happen. And I think that, you know, we look at that, you know, we all want the best that we can do for our schools. But again, it's when we're purchasing and buying and implementing what we need to be thinking of the big picture as a whole. And if I'm going to put something in place, okay, am I putting something in place now for something that is most likely to happen? And I'm mitigating a risk that is likely to happen right now. Or let's say there's another scenario, you know, a risk that is less likely to happen, and I put in a technology component to address that, but I didn't feel that space of daily needs, so to say, things that I need to overcome every day, or facilitate, you know, egress, ingress into a school, for example. If I didn't put in an access control system, and I put in a how do I say this, a camera system that and again, they're not disparaging that the camera system's detecting weapons, and I didn't put in an access control system or put in those locks for when that system detects the weapon, I'm kind of in a bad place, so to say, where I need that technology, those simple things, that simple approach. We look at pass, for example, we call it tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. You look at what we do in pass is we make recommendations on filling your gaps with what some would call the lower end technologies, policies, and procedures, and building upon that. So where I think that's where the weakness is we all do this, is we want to, we react to the political situation, or that, what happened in that next state or down the street. We react to that, but then we're not filling the holes that we needed to fill before.
Yeah. And many schools have been purchasing door blockers and barricade devices to put in the classrooms. Their perception is these will keep intruders out or shooters in case of an emergency and really secure their students. I believe these fall into what we were just discussing as well. What's your opinion on these devices?
I'm going to say what I have found the biggest, when we look at door and hardware, I think, the simple fact is looking at your situation, empowering your teacher, empowering your students to be able to lock a door in an active threat situation is important. And what I worry about barricades is, number one, some of them are complex, some of them are, or they may be simple, but they do away with, when we teach kids to deal, and staff to deal with active threat situations, the ability for them to make decisions, is important. And when I look at like a classroom lock, I think it is a heck of a lot more effective than a barricade that's sitting on the floor that is constantly reminding that individual that why that device is there.
Technology continues to shape our lives in all facets. And I wanted to ask you, how can we better use technology in schools to improve safety and security?
Well, some of the projects I've been working on, right now, for example, one of the situations that school districts across the country are facing is vaping. Vaping is a huge problem, and it's, some school districts, maybe 60% of their discipline matters are dealing with vaping. And so when I look at like technology, there's a vape sensor companies are out there have these wonderful vape sensors that can detect the mist that is going up into the detectors. But that's not the only thing that you can do. There's things that you can do with your, those vape sensors can unify into many of the video management systems. But we also look at the door and hardware, and we think about that technology, to mitigate vaping. But we also think of, one of the wonderful things that your company is doing and many of the other companies are doing is have these wireless locks, and the ability to, put a lock on a pretty inexpensive in my thoughts. Okay. Putting them on a locker room door, and on that locker room door, it opens up on a schedule for, the students to get into the locker room and then go to their class, and the door locks behind them, And why is that so important? Because you look at many of the schools every day, they deal with situations, for example, where locker room thefts. Heck, we used to deal with that in our school district all the time. While the kids they're at their most vulnerable, their wallet, their cell phone, their whatever they brought with them is in their purse or their pants pocket. And somebody will come in and, while they're out there at the swimming pool or out on the football field or the baseball field doing their class, they'll be in there, popping in there and breaking into their locker and taking their things. So when we look at these components, we're looking at reducing risk. Is that 100% perfect? No, because there's going to be a will or way, but you're making things harder for the people wanting to do bad things. We look at so when we talk about, your door and hardware, that's very important for day by day business. We look at, like after hours activities, for example, we're seeing electronic locks, where schools are used by the community for Boy Scouts, community recreation. Everybody's using those facilities every day. Well, in the old days, it used to be a free for all. You have everybody coming into the school. Anybody can wander anywhere they wanted to. So now we're seeing schools putting on, electronic locks and into the fire doors and then not violating code. We're looking at our code because we have to have egress out the door because of fire code. But we're able to partition off the building and protect the rest of the building from bad things happening. Things like theft and other things. But I also look at things like we look at the video management systems, and we look at the access control systems. It's like Legos for us in schools, in the school districts. For example, we put in a video management system. We put in a access control system. Everybody is, a school district should be looking at open API, advanced protocol integrations into their school district, and the ability for us to take those access control systems and unify our doors, control our doors, monitor our cameras, monitor our vape sensors, monitor our asset protection devices, monitor our visitor management, but what is that doing by unifying and all of these components? It's enabling our ability to respond quickly and more efficiently and more proactively to the situation. But what else does that do with these APIs and these unifications? Well, they're all running in the background, where before, with the old days, I'm older. Okay, I was started in schools where they didn't have any of these things. There's all, we'd come to my schools in the 1990, elementary school, was built in the 50s, would have like 30 doors on the outside. Guess what? Every one of those doors was unlocked on the outside. Anybody could walk off the street, come and, take somebody away. But what we've now looked at is, because of technology, or whether it be the mechanical side that you guys offer, or the electronic wireless, or all of these things, the video management systems, the access control systems, the student hall pass systems, we have ways now that have made us more efficient, but also have made us far more safer than where we were 30 some years ago. And thankfully, and as we look, though, the threats outside, as we talked about, the community micros have improved, unifying and putting these so-called Legos together has helped us keep our schools far safer.
What are some other areas in the school that they can use access control to, limit, where students go, or only provide access to authorized building occupants?
Well, you think about, we have an age now, especially when we talk about you and the other lock companies out there, these wireless wonderful locks. Okay, I'm a huge proponent of them. And as we talked about that locker room, having that wireless lock on that is mitigating a risk of theft and other unwanted activity. And then we look at like stages. Now, stages, if you look at like an assessment of a building, stages are places where it's dark. Kids got hormones and things, they're going to be down there, and things that you don't want happening could take place in a very dark place with furniture and, seclusion and things. So what do you want to do to that? You can't, a lot of school districts have a problem. Somebody forgets to lock the door, they forgot to lock the door, but you look at having a schedule on that door, or having that electronic lock in there, that door opens up for that class that's at 5th period. Instead of it being open from 8 to 12, it's opening up at 12 o'clock for that class and that supervisor, that teacher that's supervising that class. So when I look at that, you look at the locks, what they do. Another piece that we see is partitioning, like we talked about. Partitioning of the buildings is very important, but we also look at the lockdown functions. And on the electronic side, some schools can't afford to electrify all their doors, and if they can, all power to them. Okay, but what I would say is, and I've helped in giving advice to other manufacturers and developing their products, is if you do an electronic function, you still have to have that piece on the inside of the students and the teacher to be able to lock that door, regardless of the electronic function of it. If it's in a lockdown, that's great. That's a backup, so to say, in a lockdown. But when we look at these situations, seconds matter, so to say. So you're seeing a lot more of prohibited areas, for example, where there's some schools that might have a hallway or room that, you know, should not be anything going on, and the ability to have that, you know, secure and understand. But they may need to go in there, like might be an abandoned wing, so to say. So they store their school furniture down there, or you know, some other supplies. Somebody needs to get down there, but you don't want it to be somebody can get there all the time. So that's where you're starting to see more of these electronic locks popping up into the school interiors. MDF, IDF rooms. No, thank God that's a standard. The old days of the janitor's closet, where your video management system and your access control server provide, and then when the janitor throws the mop bucket down onto the sink, the water splashes up and fries out your whole access control system and video management system. Now we have protected spaces in almost every school in America. They're moving to this, is the MDF and IDF room format, which is wise, so to say, to protect that. We also look at, protecting the infrastructure. We look at all the cabling that is done. One of the things that's always been funded in our schools, it's always been a funding issue, in other areas, is the E-rate program. And, one of the reasons, schools were able to successfully respond to the COVID emergency, for example, with, e-learning tools and, just the ability to give them tools like, books, tablets, laptops, whatever, e-learning books. And the ability for these students to take that out there was because of the E-rate program, for example. Now they don't buy the hardware, but the infrastructure is provided, by that E-rate program. For example, at the minimum, a school district can fund 40% of their wiring and, the things that facilitate the egress of the internet in their schools, the LAN, not the hard points, okay, the endpoints, but the wiring, the infrastructure. So you have to protect those, because when you look at that, schools, there's a lot of that kind of material that's in there. That's why it's so important that we need to protect that.
I wanted to give you an opportunity to give us your closing thoughts on school security post-pandemic in today's world with electronics and technologies and bright students. So just wanted to give you a chance to give us some closing thoughts.
Well, I might look old and gray here, but I do, I do have my own teenagers here. I have a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old right now. And I think about them, the challenges that they've had, and all these other students across our country and the world. They have a world where they lost their social connections. They may have lost their athletics. They may have lost their ability to learn in the way that they traditionally learned in their early lives. And that impacts everyone. And we look at that, they see the news, they may know somebody that died from COVID or other situations. We look at, sadly, we look at this emergency and we look at what the insurance industry, for example, reported the death rate was up 40% for their age group and above, in the younger millennials. And that's just crazy when you think about it. Now, it wasn't from COVID. It's just from a variety of things, whether that be suicide or sickness or, whatever it is. There's a lot of angst that this is all in, politics, media. There's a lot of angst. But what I would suggest as we emerge and come out of this is we don't create more angst. We look at what we could do holistically. We look at it in a way that whatever we put into the schools is enhancing that teacher to teach and that student to learn, and the community not to worry. But, nobody wants to see their kid in a fish aquarium. Okay. We need to, we need to look, and we need to be proactive and be open-minded to what security technology can do to help. Because what we bring, as you as a provider, other manufacturers, regardless of what they are, that you're bringing sound solutions to the school, and these tools can also mitigate and help to diminish other threats. And we need to be in an all hazard sense to continue to do that. What I worry about is we've lost that with COVID, for example. in some cases. We've been dealing with COVID. Now we've lost our means to deal with all of the hazards that have not disappeared and are exasperated, probably even more because of the lack of connections and the, being married to a school psychologist, for example. I hear, from her, and I remember dealing with it in my career. Mental health is a huge issue for our kids, and it's even more than it was 30 some years ago. I believe it was there 30 years ago, but now we have social media, we have all these things. We need to be cognitive of that, and we need to be thinking in a well-rounded set of physical safety and security, emergency preparedness, and mental health. And as we emerge, we cannot forget any of those factors, and we need not to be siloizing in schools. We need to be building a unified approach to these problems as we emerge from this. And I believe schools are going to do that. I really do. And I believe that folks like yourself, others, you're going to give us tools to do that. We're going to put down the proper procedures and responses. But we got to be cognitive of not making things worse than what they are now, because we're teeter-tottering right now. The whole, it's sad where we are right now. But we got to be optimistic. People like yourself, the industry, we got to be optimistic, and we got to bring the best things that we can do to help society, to keep society.
Thanks again for your time, Guy. We really appreciate you sitting down with us. There are so many conversations out there about the best way to keep our students, teachers, and schools safe. We appreciate your perspective as a past school security director and a continuing voice in this conversation through your organization, PASS. If you're interested in learning more, we have videos on other school security topics, which you can find at the website on your screen. Thank you.